Watch out, cat. Oh boy, it's too early for this. But anyway, I'm gonna do it. Part 2. Part 2 to what BMSs do. Because obviously, part 1, I did not say enough. So, this is a part 2. Once again, and let me be very clear about what I am saying. I wish I knew sign language, because I would do sign language at the same time. What I said yesterday was that cells do not need a BMS to balance themselves. Okay? What I said was, when you take cells of different voltages and put them together physically in parallel by connecting the positives all together and their negatives all together, if they are different voltages, they will balance themselves out by that physical connection alone. Okay? They have cell balancers that balance cells prior to putting them together in parallel, to make that a safer safer thing to do. It's not needed. Okay? It would be needed if cells were very far apart on their voltages. Yeah, it's a lot safer to do, because if you connect cells that have way different voltages together, as I said yesterday, there's going to be a huge rush of current. If you just have a single nickel strip, it will probably burn those nickel strips up. But cell balancing is something you do before cells are connected in parallel. Okay? But once they're connected in parallel, they will all read as one single voltage, because they're all connected, and they will all adjust themselves to that same voltage. When cells are in parallel, there is nothing that one single wire going to this entire group of cells can do to change the voltage of any of these cells single-handedly. It's physically impossible. Okay? One single wire going to an entire group of cells can no way change the voltage of any one cell in this parallel group. Those wires that go to that group of cells only are monitoring the entire voltage of this entire group of cells. A smart BMS does not balance cells. A smart BMS only gives you full-time telemetry of what's happening in your pack. That's all a smart BMS is capable of doing, other than what I said, shutting off the charge side. Once it sees a crazy voltage by one of those, once it's getting a crazy voltage, or one of those cell groups are overcharging, It can shut off that entire charging to all of the cells, and it can shut off the output current to all of the cells. But it cannot pick out one single cell in a cell group and change the voltage of one single cell that's in parallel with other cells. Smart BMS is exactly just what I said. Gives you an active live view, live telemetry on the app, so you can see in group 3, S3, that cell group voltages is this. You can see all the different cell group voltages. The total voltage of this entire group. But it does not single-handedly, one single cell in that group, it cannot adjust the voltage of one single cell in a group of cells that are physically connected in parallel. It cannot do that. Even the active BMS cannot do that. It can adjust the voltage for that entire group, but not for a single cell. And that's a very expensive device. It's a separate device. Those are two different devices. Smart BMS and an active BMS are two different things. They're not the same thing. When you buy a smart BMS, that is not balancing any groups of cells in your pack. It is just allowing you to see those cell voltages of those different groups. That is it. Cell balancers balance prior to putting them in parallel. Okay? There is a difference. So, if you don't believe me, I challenge anyone to prove me wrong. Take a group of cells like this, take 5 cells, make them all different voltages, put them in parallel, okay? Let them sit for 5 minutes, come back, disconnect them, and I guarantee you all of those cells will be the exact same voltage. That is what I said. The act of putting cells in parallel physically, those cells will balance themselves. Because at that point, when you connect all of the positives together and all of the negatives together, they will adjust to the same voltage. This entire group will read the exact same voltage, and when you disconnect them after that, they will all stay at that same voltage. Unless there's a bad cell, obviously. If the cell is bad, then that cell's not going to be able to maintain that voltage. It will slowly start depleting. But initially, when you take them apart, they will all read the same voltage. Make no mistake about that. Now, I'm not just saying this because that is something I read. I'm saying this because I play with this stuff and I know from experience. I'm not speaking on something that I've read somewhere. You know, there's funny how people can read something or see someone else say something and take that as the gospel. And when they haven't even done it themselves. Okay? I challenge any of you watching right now to do exactly what I said and prove me wrong with a video. I bet you $100 that once you put cells in parallel and let them sit for a couple minutes, they will all be the exact same voltage. That is what I said. They do not need any special device to balance themselves. They will balance themselves after the physical connection alone. An active BMS and a smart BMS are two different things. A cell balancer is a different device from a BMS. Cell balancers balance cells individually prior to you putting them in parallel. When people buy groups of mixed cells, that is why they go through and they measure all the voltages of cells, and they put cells that are in the same voltage range together, in different little groups, so that when they make their packs, because they don't have a cell balancer, when they make their packs, the voltages are close enough that when they put them in parallel, there won't be a huge influx of current, and there'll be no danger to that. But if those voltages are slightly off, this one's 3.75, this one's 3.69, this one's 3.8, that's slightly off. But they will equalize once connected in parallel. But if you connect a group of cells where this one is 2.5, this one is 2.6, and these are 4.2 fully charged, there will be a huge rush of current, and this group of cells will get hot and possibly burn a single nickel strip because there will be too much current flowing. But once you put a piece of wire or a piece of nickel or copper that is strong enough that it won't burn under those conditions, and you leave them like that, after 5 minutes, those cells will be the exact same voltage. Okay? That is... Companies or BMSs are describing cell balancing. They are not describing individual cell balancing as what I was talking about. Individual cell balancing in an entire P group. When they are saying balancing a pack, they're talking about the total pack, because each cell group where those leads are going to, they're talking about the entire row of cells. Once these cells are connected in parallel, this is one cell, basically. One particular cell. It is no longer individual cells. This is all one. So when they talk about pack balancing, they're talking about if this entire group of cells is reading a different voltage from the other cell groups, okay? Where these balance leads are going to a specific cell group. So, for the pack to be balanced, all of those cell groups should have the same voltage, all right? So, when the 3S cell group is off, meaning the rest of the cell groups are reading 4.2 volts, this entire group of cells is reading 3.7. That means the pack is out of balance, not an individual cell. Okay, that is another difference what people are misunderstanding. I was talking about individual cells. Once they are parallel together, they balance themselves. A pack being in balance is another separate thing. Okay? You have the pack being balanced, those groups, and a cell being balanced. Alright? Now, A pack being balanced, like I said, BMS is monitoring the entire group. So if you got a 20S battery, each one of these little lines is going to a entire cell group. So on your app is going to have the voltages for each one of those cell groups. Now, if there's one entire bad cell group, you're going to see that on the app. All right, but it's not going to be for no one particular cell. It's going to mean that entire group there's something wrong with that group, and the BMS is going to shut down at that point, and you won't have any more output current from the pack. It's going to cut off the discharge side. But individual cells cannot be balanced by a BMS. All right, an active BMS is going to try and balance off that entire group or get it close to the other groups, but it can't do that either. So I had to be very specific about what I'm saying because it matters. All right, now like I said, as far as individual cells, prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. All right, I think I was clear that time on what I was saying, and you guys need to understand and be specific about what you're saying. Now, I'll repeat that again. A BMS cannot balance an individual cell that's in a group. It cannot do that. It's physically impossible. It's not, it can't be done. When you put cells in parallel, there's no longer individual cells. Once these cells are all hooked together in parallel, this is one cell now. All right, they're all connected physically. So that BMS is reading this entire group. Now this entire group can have a different voltage from the rest of the groups. And that's what you're going to see on your smart app, that this whole group is off. But at that point, that BMS, a smart BMS, cannot change the voltage of this entire group. This wire that's going to this group is not going to be able to increase the voltage of this cell group and fix this group. That is an active BMS, not a smart BMS. All right, guys, have a great day. Crisscrossing wires, deuces.